Hi, welcome to Money Confidence. I'm Crystal Ockley, and I'm the Chief Financial Strategist here at Confidence Wealth. Every week, I try to bring a topic that is most talked about in my meetings that I think would be useful to you. So today's topic is going to be sequence of return, and what we refer to here at Confidence Wealth as SOR risk. Now, this is something that I have talked about at many of my events, whether they were live or webinars or in-person seminars. You remember what they were like? So we talk about this all the time. And the reason I think it's so important to understand that is that even in just this week, some of the meetings I had with some people that have been very successful in this accumulation phase and done a good job of building their money, and they're about to get to this retirement, which is distribution phase, and they are not aware what SOR risk really truly means. So I want to touch base on this really quickly. So first, let's understand the different phases of actual planning. We've got what's called first accumulation phase. Accumulation phase is when you're working really hard and you're saving your money and you're aggressively investing in some cases to get it to a level that you want it to be. Then you get to the stage where it's either at the beginning of your retirement or maybe a few years before your retirement, where you don't necessarily need the funds yet. That's called the preservation phase. Preservation phase is where you can't really go backward. So you can't take big hits and have to rebuild because you don't have that time period anymore, but you still want to have growth. Then you go to that third, which is the distribution phase of retirement. Distribution phase is now all of your hard-earned money needs to supplement the rest of your income, whether they be Social Security, pension, rental, or whatever they may be, to give you the lifestyle that you desire. So most people actually jump from accumulation to the distribution phase. They skip that preservation phase sometime, which makes it even more difficult to now understand and change the psychology of I'm no longer in the accumulation phase. I am now in the distribution phase. So they apply the same exact elements. And by they, I mean investors themselves, retirees themselves, and many times, many advisors do the same thing, where they're applying what worked in the accumulation phase to that distribution phase. And unfortunately, that doesn't work all the time. So it becomes heads I win, tails I lose, because it depends on what's happening with the market returns at that beginning stage of the distribution phase. So what does that mean? At the very beginning, when you retire and you start taking money from your retirement funds, what happens in the market during those first few years can actually determine the success of your retirement in whole. So I'll give you an example. Someone that retired, for example, in early 90s, by the time they reached the late 90s and the dot-com, they already built such big growth, because 90s, it was roaring, it was great, that if they had already been retired at those beginning years of the 90s, they were living off of their investments, but the return was so high that by the time they reached the dot-com era, it wasn't as hard because they were already 10, 15 years into the retirement. So yes, they took a hit, but they were able to survive. Now, this is, of course, I'm just giving this as an example. There are other elements that go into that. So now imagine someone that retired in the year 2000. That's when all the bull market at that point had stopped. And then all of a sudden there was the dot-com, right? It went down, took 7 years approximately for the market to recover. Then they hit the 2008 crash. So someone retiring in year 2000 or 1999, the late 90s, didn't have the same outcome as someone retiring in the late 80s, early 90s. They actually faced a reality of running out of money. Not because their investment changed, not because their philosophy changed, their sequence of return changed. So you have to account for that. You can't change what happens in the market, right? We don't know what's going to happen. What if we go for another? I mean, look at what's going on now. We've been, except for if we take the pandemic, which was an anomaly, and then the recovery happened quickly, we haven't yet hit where I believe economy meets the stock market, because at some point, everything that happened in the last few years, plus the debt we're in, the unemployment rates and all of that is going to catch up. And then what happens? So we don't know when the next bear market is coming. We know it's coming. It can't be an if, because if you think that, then that's just very, like, I don't even know what to say to that, right? So if you think the market is forever going to be great and is going to have the same returns, that's not realistic. We know it's going to go up and down. We know on a long term, it's always going to be okay, because it's not timing the market, it's your time in the market. But the problem is your time in the market and how you take that distribution out and having you survive it. So are you prepared, in a sense? That's what you want to always know. Now, I know for our clients, everything's always stress tested. That's what we do to make sure that the sequence of return for them is not going to backfire in a way that it's going to have to change their lifestyle. And that's the point. My point is, you have to think differently, and you have to start thinking that distribution phase of retirement, the SOR risk can be extreme. How do I now modify and have the right buckets for the right time, so one downturn doesn't wipe everything out? So I love that. I love knowing that my clients, we can sleep at night knowing they're going to be okay, because the safety net was put in place. I want to make sure that everybody else that's listening to this has thought about it. Have you also ran a simulation, a Monte Carlo simulation, a stress testing to make sure that you're on the right track? If you haven't got a second opinion, please feel free to message me here and email me at askcrystal@confidencewealth.com or askcrystal@icwm.com. We'll be happy to get you in with an advisor that can do a quick analysis. One of our wealth managers can do that for you and make sure that you know exactly what's going on and how would the SOR risk affect you. So with that said, always remember, accumulation and distribution are two different phases in your financial life. And just like everything else we do when it comes to our health, it comes to our appearance, with the decades changing and things happening in our 30s and 40s is different than we're in our 50s and 60s. So you need to apply the same thing when it comes to your investments and your income plan, to make sure that roadmap is in place to get you from point A to point B in a comfortable, not a roller coaster ride way, but in a comfortable way where you can have lots of fun. Even if it's boring getting there, I'd rather you have a boring ride, but get there, than have a roller coaster ride and be stressed and maybe or maybe not make it there. So that's it at this end. If you need anything, you know where to find me, and feel free to message me here if you have any questions on clarifying the SOR risk or want to learn more about it. I have a retirement planning webinar that goes in depth about sequence of return. It gives examples that I think will be helpful to you. So if you want that, also ask for it. Otherwise, I'll see you next week with whatever the hot topic is next week. Have a great one.